I really enjoy gathering and crafting in games, and historically this has been true in LOTRO. Yet for the past while, I haven't enjoyed crafting quite as much as I used to. But very exciting news here is that crafting is getting overhauled in the Corsairs of Umbar expansion or Update 38 coming to LOTRO later this year. So I am going to focus today on what is coming in the future instead of dwelling on what we currently have, but the short version of how I feel about crafting is I enjoy crafting for the low levels, but the mid levels, especially up to Gondor, is when I really get bored of crafting, and then it's kind of hit or miss with some updates above level like 100, 105 range. And I think one of the biggest issues is I just don't feel motivated or excited to craft stuff or even gather stuff, and this comes from somebody who absolutely loves gathering in basically every other game I play. And for guild crafting, I'll just say that I'm not a fan of it. But what we have today, I think, is one of the more exciting changes coming with the Corsairs of Umbar expansion, which is the crafting overhaul, at least for the Umbar crafting tier, as we'll get to. Again, not going to dwell too much on the past, so we'll jump straight to the no more tier restrictions. This is actually very exciting if you're looking to jump straight into Umbar crafting. So crafters will be able to execute and learn any recipes available from the Umbar profession trainers without having previously completed all the tiers before Umbar. So as they say here, you don't have to slog, which yes, it can be a real slog through the early tiers to get to the newest tier of crafting. Now, I really wonder what this means for alt. So if you have like a level, say 10 character that you just use to craft, can you actually craft all of the Umbar stuff and get access to all the recipes, whether you acquire them from your character that's actually in the Umbar level range and they're just bound to account so you can pass them to your alt? Or can your alt actually directly gather recipes? Or perhaps something I might personally prefer is if there aren't any really recipe limitations or restrictions and you're more so limited by your resources and materials. Perhaps those questions will be answered at a later time because there are more details here, is that this type of feature is not going to be implemented backwards, at least right away, but over time they do intend to remove the early tier requirements for all the previous crafting tiers. Also, one thing I know a lot of players have been requesting, and I think that's the reason they're implementing this, is we have no more vocations. So your professions in LOTRO are determined by your vocation right now. Your vocation comes with 3 professions and you're just locked into whatever that vocation has. But now you have the freedom to choose which 3 professions you want in the expansion. So if you currently have a crafting vocation, you will just keep all the professions associated with it, but then you can switch them. And if you become a new crafter or with a new character you craft on them, you can actually choose the 3 professions that you want. Eventually, they are also looking to add a 4th profession, but you'll probably have to buy this. It sounds like through Mithril is their current plan, but they also don't know when this will be ready for release, so it sounds like after the expansion. I feel like I'm using the word exciting too much, but this might be the most exciting of all the things I have seen so far, which is with tracking and gathering, more specifically with gathering here. So with the gathering professions, you'll be able to harvest any node of that gathering profession type regardless of the tier. So if you just start out with your forester, you can already gather Gunabad wood, for example. There is no more restriction on your character actually having to have that crafting tier for your gathering profession. So as they say here, gathering ore, wood, and relics is something you just understand, but specializing in advancing, that's going to be focused on the refinement of the materials you collect. And I, again, as somebody who loves gathering, absolutely love that you can just harvest and collect any node you find when traveling. I know on a lot of my alts, if I forget to actually keep up and do a lot of the processing to advance their crafting tiers for gathering, they will fall behind and then I suddenly won't be able to gather stuff, and it's kind of a disappointment when that happens. So I think this is going to be a huge quality of life change that kind of surpasses this other huge quality of life change that I skipped over here. So if you have multiple gathering professions, which right now would include forester, prospector, and technically scholar has a gathering component to it, if you have these professions, you can actually track multiple resource nodes at a time. So essentially you will have one ability now that encompasses all the gathering professions that you have, and you'll just have a generic track resources. The gatherer inside of me already really likes this update, and we haven't even gotten too much into the crafting, which starts here with the top end crafting. So I think for me, when they talk about for a while now, we've been listening to your feedback that newly released crafting tiers were not as appealing as you would like. For me, this is dated back to, I would say, level 65 5, maybe with Mirkwood. I'm a little bit more murky on actually how crafting was back then, but at the very least with Rise of Isengard, I haven't been the biggest fan on how they have done the newly released crafting tiers. Again, it's not been all bad since Isengard, and this does include Isengard, but I just think it could be a lot better. So what do we have in store with the expansion and perhaps the new tier? So it sounds like their plans is for top-end crafters to not feel required to engage in in-game experiences that don't suit their playstyle. They want us to play how we like, which is definitely a good thing. So they're going to start expanding, it looks like, the places where crafters can get the needed materials actually to make top-end gear and items. So that could include, it sounds like, guild-based daily and weekly quests. Again, I don't like guilds as how they are right now, but perhaps they're going to implement some changes to guilds that would make them better, and I think a little bit more accessible would be nice. Right now it's a really grindy and daily limited, like cooldown limited system that of course you can pay to skip, which is annoying. But a lot of time-gated stuff, basically, which I really don't like with something like that. But setting that aside, it sounds like they could include guild-based daily and weekly quests, landscape quest rewards, accomplishment rewards, which sounds like it could include basically anything in the game that you accomplish. Vendor purchases, that would be pretty simple, as well as missions. It sounds like they also will maintain drops and raids, featured instances, delvings, and other end-game content, so they don't exclude any method someone may use to get the recipe or items they want. I'm kind of hoping that the idea that they're getting at it here is that they'll have some generic items. It's the same item that you can acquire from a variety of ways, basically. Also, when do y'all think we'll be able to craft cat pets? Now they're creating a new resource that they're currently calling Luckstone Setting, which is kind of an odd name to me, but maybe it'll make more sense when we actually see it somewhat in game with the expansion. But this is going to be an evergreen item that you can use to create enhanced versions of crafted items, or at least upgradable items. Maybe they're not all crafted. But you may have noticed actually with update 37 in the Comb Forester event that these Luckstone settings are a potential reward from that. Of course, it doesn't help that the Forester event has been basically canceled twice now, I think at least, and I don't even know if it's back up yet by the time this video comes out. It sounds like they'll have more information focused on these upgradable items in the future, but these Luckstone setting items, it's actually going to be a currency, it sounds like, and that it's stored in your wallet. I assume it's account bound. I hope it's an account bound type thing. And it sounds like they are intending to have it a limited ability to stack, so there will be a currency cap. I know a lot of people don't like currency caps, but it sounds like how it will work. And the point is, and this is true, it's that it does ensure that there's a flow of the usage of that item, so you don't just stack it forever. And it sort of forces you to use it before you hit the currency cap. So that sounds like their general idea and reason for having the currency cap here. But it does sound like that obtaining them will require some effort, but there are going to be multiple ways to get it. Again, I would suspect that all the content pieces that we talked about earlier would be possible ways, but let's see what they actually have listed here. So crafting events like the Comb Forester event, and when they add events for the other crafting professions, there's also going to be guild trade with Umbar and traditional guilds. Hint that the Umbar crafting guild might be different than these traditional guilds that we have had in the past, or the current guild system. So it sounds like when the expansion releases, only the Umbar guilds will offer this item, but there will be story quests that bring these items to the other tiers, to the other crafting reputation guild tiers that come before Umbar, basically, that we have in game right now. And then these can also drop from barters, or you can get them from barter and rare drop rewards and featured instances and delvings, and then accomplishments. So this includes allegiances. Ugh, I don't like allegiances in LOTRO, but factions, I prefer regular reputation factions, at least compared to the current allegiances that we have. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a new allegiance with Umbar, but hopefully it's one, if we do, that I would enjoy more. While I'm thinking about it though, please let me know your thoughts on allegiances and if you like them or not. I think there is a lot of potential there compared to a traditional reputation faction, but again, I don't really enjoy any of the Legion stuff that we have in game right now. Okay, so they have a little bit more here on general resources and advancements, so a little bit less specific with the upgrading and top-end crafting. So we intend to have advancement along the Umbar tiers to be slower, so it's actually going to be slower to progress than traditional crafting. So that represents like learning new techniques of a foreign region. That kind of makes sense from the lore background of it. So they plan to expand this crafting tier as they tell the story of Umbar and complete the epic story in the region. So they're focusing their efforts on, as they say here, having a new paradigm where they can operate and expand crafting inside of the game consistently for years to come. That would be greatly appreciated. As I've hinted at these past expansions that we have had, or even just updates, crafting has been hit or miss. It's very, very inconsistent what you can craft, how you can craft it, what it takes to craft even. So having something that is consistent where you can kind of expect what the requirements will be to craft, what you can craft, and all that sort of stuff, I think will be a great thing moving forward for LOTRO. But it sounds like with the slower progression and this new paradigm, the amount of basic materials needed to complete many recipes will be increasing to ensure a healthy economy. Honestly, I don't really see a problem with this right now because I have not had to deal with any crafting resource management in a very long time, just because you get so many materials, and at least for me, not being motivated to craft basically at all, I've never actually run out of resources. I don't even know how much it takes to craft current stuff just because I've never actually had to pay attention to it, so it's not been committed to memory. Never mind that I haven't crafted since like Goonabad launch, I think is the last time I actually crafted something. At least something that is not low level. I still craft low level stuff back when crafting was, and technically still is, I think, pretty good. Anyway, sidetrack aside, they are thinking about letting players actually convert upper tier materials downward. I'm wondering what they're thinking about converting lower tier materials upward into higher crafting tiers, but this is something that they have not made a formal decision on, and it's just an idea at this point. I always have liked the ability of being able to convert raw materials up and down. Of course, it can be expensive and inefficient, but it's something I've always been a general fan of, so I definitely wouldn't mind seeing that in LOTRO's crafting. Alright, and here we are. It sounds like basically at the end with the guilds. So they are separating crafting guilds, as they've already hinted at, in Umbar. So the new crafting tier, yeah, because that no longer requires previous tiers of advancements. So you will join the craft guilds of Umbar separately, and they have their own advancement path. I actually really like this general idea that the crafting guild that you are joining, so like it could be the Westamnet guild, the Westfold guild, some of those older tiers, or the Umbar guild as we have here, each of those individual factions essentially will have their own advancement. So I really like that idea, so you can focus in just on that if you want to advance that crafting guild, and you don't need all the previous tiers. That's where the real grind comes in. But it sounds like the traditional guilds for now will remain relevant, since you'll use some of your crafting materials in the Umbar crafting guild to advance your traditional crafting guild as well. Okay, that just made me a lot less excited, because I was really hoping that this would eventually move to them just abandoning the traditional crafting guilds and going entirely in on each like crafting tier having its own associated crafting guild basically. But we'll see, maybe this is intended to be more of a catch-up mechanic with the traditional crafting guild. It doesn't say anything about the other way around though, if you'll use some of your traditional crafting guild, maybe materials or even things that you craft to advance Umbar crafting or even Umbar crafting guild though. So maybe if that's not the case, it won't be too bad. Also, they actually do have some of these. They had them, I know in Minas Morgul and even Gundabad, they had some of the stuff where there were like instances, resource instances basically for crafters to help them advance. Now it looks like they're intending to bring that with missions, quests, and instances, and also within the craft guilds of Umbar, so maybe a little bit less specific to crafting in general, and more, actually, yes, more specific to the craft guilds of Umbar. And it sounds like not all these will arrive on the expansion launch, and some of them will be after the initial release, and development will continue as they move into the future. And there's actually one more important note with top-end crafting that we have kind of known, because Standing Stone Games has said this for a while, but crafters will be able to make best in slot items if you do dedicate enough time and resources into the effort. And just like Standing Stone Games, I am excited about these crafting changes as well. It sounds like at the very least it will be a better place to start than the current crafting that we have and what we have had with the launch of the recent expansions in LOTRO, which for me again dates back until about Siege of Mirkwood, which I wasn't around for the launch of that, and Rise of Isengard, which I also wasn't around for the launch of that, but I did make it to the level cap in Rise of Isengard and did some crafting actually relevant to that expansion, but not too much. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to these crafting changes that are coming in the Corsairs of Umbar expansion. Let me know your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching everyone.